And one of the more interesting fights that is going to be taking place very soon is going to be on the Superfly card on HBO, featuring several super flyweight stars, champions, former champions, etc., contenders. Naoya Inoue defending his WBO super flyweight title against Antonio Nieves. And this is kind of an interesting one because it is Naoya Inoue's U.S. debut, his HBO debut as well. Um, but in Antonio Nieves, he's fighting a guy that has a record that looks, I think, somewhat deceiving. He's 17-1-2 with 9 knockouts. So he's not necessarily a huge puncher. His one loss was actually in his last fight, a split decision loss to Nikolai Potapov. And those two draws were actually fairly recent too. One of them was to then undefeated Stefan Young, and the second one was to a fighter by the name of Alejandro Santiago. Um, Otherwise, though, he has a very good record. There isn't too much footage of him out there, but from what I've seen, it seems like he kind of styles himself as somewhat of like kind of a back foot kind of counter punching guy with a lot of jabs. This guy throws a lot of jabs, and kind of funny enough, a jab is something that I could potentially see giving Naoya Inoue at least a little bit of trouble, a little bit of pause potentially. The guys that with Inoue's style, which I feel kind of weird saying that because Inoue's style is almost like a very fluid one. He can fight coming forward, he can fight going backwards. He's a fighter that's very variable with how he chooses to fight. He can fight on the inside, he can fight on the outside, he can fight at mid range, and he's pretty much equally good doing all of those things. I do think like maybe at mid range he tends to be the best though, simply because of the fact that he's able to just get so much torque, so much leverage on his shots, but he's also able to utilize his good measure of distance and his hand speed to be able to, you just utilize that kind of natural agility and speed and athleticism advantage that he has over a lot of his opponents and really make that power and that strength a lot more pronounced, because when it's combined with that speed, as opposed to where it's on the inside, it's just that strength on its own on the inside, and the opponents have a little bit more opportunity to potentially counter and such. At mid-range to outside, Inoue is just extremely dangerous and very, very difficult to really get a beat on, to really be able to hit accurately. Um, Nieves, I think, potentially could give Inoue some trouble with the jab. But, I mean, pretty much from what I've seen of Nieves, he really doesn't seem too dissimilar from the fighters that Inoue has fought recently. What I mean by that is, he looks stylistically somewhat similar to like a Ricardo Rodriguez, who was Inoue's last opponent, who he knocked out in 3 rounds. He looks stylistically fairly similar to David Carmona, who gave Inoue probably his toughest fight so far, simply because he went actual 12 rounds with Inoue and won a couple of rounds against him. Or like a Warlito Perenas, but once again, Warlito Perenas, he was able to catch him in the second round and get rid of him. And the thing about Inoue is he just hits so hard, where even if you have an opponent that is really a legitimately good or high level opponent, or really deserving opponent, number one contender, pretty much he's been fighting nothing but his number one contenders to try and clear out his mandatory so that he could get a shot at the likes of Chocolatito, which incidentally this whole card it seems like is kind of a build up towards an Inoue versus Chocolatito fight, with I'm guessing HBO and ESPN and most people wanting to probably see Inoue come through victorious in that eventual matchup, simply because he has the upside, he has the upswing, he's the young guy, he's 24, he's the guy with the bigger knockout power at the higher weight, and just he's the naturally bigger guy too, which I think means something as well with regard to grasping some of the larger audience, and I mean that without any pun intended, some of the broader, larger audience of a lot of Western viewers in, the United States, and the other kind of Anglospheres of the world. Um, but I mean, this fight, it's pretty cut and dry as far as I'm concerned. It's probably the most cut and dry of the entire card. Definitely of the televised card. I think Gonzalez and Suisaket. I do favor Gonzalez in that fight, but Suisaket, his physicality, I think, is something that is going to be difficult for anybody and everybody every time he steps in that ring, to be able to deal with. with Cuadras and Estrada. That's really a 50-50 fight between two very disparate styles, where you could see either one guy or the other getting an advantage, but then the other one snatching that advantage right back away from him because of the way that both guys are able to adjust. Here with Inoue and Nieves, from what I've seen, he just looks a little bit too one-paced. He kind of reminds me of Sullivan Barrera when he fought against Andre Ward. I mean, Sullivan Barrera actually overall, in terms of his style, he kind of reminds me of him, but especially in terms of fighting Andre Ward, where he was fighting, just a higher level guy. That was a big step up for him to go from fighting the guys he had been fighting to fighting Ward. I think it's somewhat the same for Nieves. Even though he's fought a couple of, undefeated prospect guys that could potentially be future champions, Potapov, Young, etc., he hasn't fought an animal like Naoya Inoue. Even though, funny enough, Nieves is actually coming down in weight to have this fight. Most of Nieves' fights have been at 122, 126, 118. He's maybe a slightly naturally bigger guy than Inoue, but he's never necessarily looked like a real big imposing bantamweight or super bantamweight. Really, if anything, he was probably taking those fights simply because they were available to him, so he took them, and they were at the weight they were at. So it's not like he necessarily had the privilege of being able to pick and choose his weight in particular and get the opponents at that weight. But here the opportunity presented itself to fight at 115 against probably the fastest, biggest rising star at the weight class, in the hottest weight class right now. And obviously he took it. I think if anything, Inoue should be able to take care of business, should be able to probably get Nieves out of there. But that's based on the limited amount of footage I've seen of Nieves. I can't necessarily completely count the man out. He does only have one loss by split decision. And kind of similar to when before Cuadras fought against Roman Gonzalez, I thought Cuadras was going to bring into that fight a much different style than he wound up fighting in that. I thought he was going to be a lot more of a spoiler and be a lot more hands-off. He was a spoiler in certain facets and certain fashions, but he fought a lot more in the grit of that fight, in the trenches. He was in and out a lot and everything, and Gonzalez was right on top of him, forcing him to fight the entire fight, but he was able to flourish in kind of being pushed to that limit. He was able to flourish in doing it. Nieves, I'm not sure if he necessarily has those gears, but we are definitely going to find out, because now Inoue is exactly the type of fighter that will put you through those paces. He's like the Michael Schumacher jumping into any sports car you could give him and freaking wringing it out, getting every ounce of whatever it's worth out of it. And if Nieves is not up to the task, if he is like a Rodriguez or like even a former champion like Kohei Kono, Karun Jarupian Lord, no more Narvaez, Inoue's going to get him out of there. He's going to knock him out, and he's going to look extremely impressive in doing it. Inoue's style reminds me very, very much of Floyd Mayweather back when Mayweather was at 130. Just like almost to a T. Reminds me very, very similar of Mayweather back in the day. Albeit I think he actually even has more power for even the 115-pound weight class than Mayweather did at 130. In comparison to his opponents and his opponent's ability to take those punches. It's like as soon as he hits these guys, they really get put on notice. Even Kohei Kono, who's a bit like of a kind of a wild, rambunctious, Maidana-esque fighter, albeit without the power, really just with a lot of the volume. Inoue started hitting him, started tagging him, and even though Kono was able to fight through a lot of it, eventually, Inoue managed to just keep on tagging him enough, and caught him with one of those left hooks, and Kono was just down and pretty much done for. Because Inoue's power is very much there. The timing is there. The ability to place those punches and get himself at the right distance to place those punches and get maximum power on it, it's all there. The guy's really the total package in terms of eye test, in terms of skill set. Really, I think his true accomplishments have yet to be completely written down. So, that's all that to say that, I definitely favor Inoue in this fight. I favor him by knockout. Probably sometime in the middle rounds. I do think that, if anything, the first round or round and a half, he'll probably be looking to kind of gauge out exactly what Nieves has, looking to try and time that jab, start coming over it with right crosses, trying to maybe kind of go shoulder roll, up underneath with right uppercuts and left hooks. And then who knows? Maybe even he'll kind of pressure Nieves, try to push Nieves back, almost bringing up Mayweather again, kind of akin to what Mayweather just did to Conor McGregor, and he went high guard, just pushed him straight back. Inoue could definitely do that too. He's a very physically strong guy even at 115. his second/third weight class, if you want to count 112, considering the fact that he never actually fought there. He jumped completely over that weight class in order to get his title at 115. But hey, we shall see. I definitely expect Inoue to impress and win a lot of fans over. He's a guy that, to me, I do think that he realizes the gravity of the moment. And not even just the gravity of the moment in this fight, but the gravity of the moment in his past fights, where it's like he kind of chose his style of fighting based on the opponent and based on kind of what was at stake in those fights. And I think that's going to be really not too different here against Nieves. He's going to look to make a statement. He's going to look to basically put his name on, on the forefront of every boxing fan's mind. So basically say that now, Inoue, if you want to be called the best at 115, you got to go through him. I'm sure that's exactly what he's looking to do. And it's very arguable that that he has every rights to that claim, considering the fact of what he did to Narvaez now a few years ago. That's still a very impressive win even to this day. And it hasn't gotten any less impressive considering the fact that even one of his former victims, one of his former rivals that he defeated at 108 is still a champion today, as well as the fact that he's been basically knocking out everybody else aside from that guy Ryuichi Taguchi and the aforementioned David Carmona, who's still a higher level contender at 115. A guy that could still give quite a few people their problems. But that's pretty much all I got for Naoya Inoue versus Nieves. Nieves, he's a reasonably serviceable opponent, good fighter generally speaking. But I do think that Naoya Inoue is just going to be proven to be on another level, and he will level Nieves and proven to be on another level. So let's see how it looks. Let's see what happens in the fight, and let's see exactly what the future portends based off of the result of what happens. I'll definitely try to do a review of this fight as well as the others as soon as I get done watching them. So stay tuned for that, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.